The sun had barely touched the tips of the trees on Sycamore Ridge when Rachel unlocked the creaky front door of her childhood home. Dust swirled in the light, pouring through the stained glass window above the staircase, each color flickering against the wooden floors like little ghosts of the past. She hadn't stepped foot inside in nearly 5 years, not since her mother's funeral, and certainly not since her sister Leah had claimed the house was too much to deal with, and shoved the keys into Rachel's reluctant hands. At the time, Rachel was in New York, living in a cramped studio, barely making rent. She didn't have the luxury to fly home and sort through memories or furniture, and so the house sat just as they left it, like a time capsule of secrets and old grudges. But now everything was different. Last week, a real estate agent left a voicemail saying an anonymous buyer had made a cash offer, nearly double the market price. "An opportunity you shouldn't ignore," she'd said. "They want it as is, no inspection, immediate closing." Rachel was skeptical, but broke enough to be intrigued. Still, something about it felt off. Rachel walked slowly through the narrow hallway, past the dusty piano, the wall of fading family photos, and that one corner in the living room where the wallpaper always peeled back like it was trying to tell a story. She reached the kitchen, where the yellowing tile had once been her mother's pride, and stared at the post-it note on the fridge. "Don't trust him. Check the shed." Rachel froze. The handwriting was shaky, a little uneven. Her heart thudded in her chest. She reached out and pulled the note off the fridge, her fingers trembling. Her mother had always been dramatic, yes, but she had also been deliberate. If this note was real, if she had left it here before she died, it meant something. Rachel stepped out back, crossing the overgrown garden to the small shed beneath the sycamore tree. The same one her father had kept locked for years, claiming it was just old junk. The padlock was gone now. Its rusted remains lay on the ground. She hesitated. Something about the air changed. It felt heavier. Inside the shed, it smelled of motor oil, old books, and mildew. But in the back, beneath a tarp, Rachel found something unexpected. A wooden trunk, sealed shut with a thick chain and a padlock that was newer than everything else in the room. Shiny, recent. Someone had been here. She turned sharply, half expecting to see someone behind her, but she was alone, or so she thought. Later that night, Rachel couldn't sleep. She booked a locksmith to come first thing in the morning, but her thoughts kept circling. Who was the buyer? Why now? And what was so important inside that trunk that someone had tried to lock it up again? The next day, the locksmith, a quiet man in his 60s with silver eyebrows and a crooked smile, took less than 5 minutes to crack the lock. Inside were hundreds of documents, deeds, letters, photographs, all meticulously labeled, and one folder marked only with a name Rachel hadn't heard since she was 16, James Delaney, her father's best friend, and the man her mother had always said ruined everything. Rachel opened the folder slowly. Inside was a notarized letter, a birth certificate, and, what made her stomach twist, a will. Not her mother's, her father's, one she had never seen before, dated 3 months after his supposed accidental death. The letter began, "If you're reading this, Rachel, then you've found the truth I could never say aloud." Her breath caught, because her father wasn't just writing from beyond the grave. He was confessing, and the buyer wasn't just interested in the house. They were trying to bury something, or someone. The house on Sycamore Ridge. Part 2, The Confession. Rachel's fingers tightened around the pages as she sat cross-legged on the dusty shed floor. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, probably the agent calling again about the sale, but she ignored it. The only thing that mattered now was the letter in her lap. Her father's handwriting was instantly familiar. Neat, slightly slanted, always with a heavy hand on the lowercase r. But what it said unraveled everything she thought she knew about her family. "If you're reading this, Rachel, then you've found the truth I could never say aloud. I failed you. I failed your mother. But I couldn't let you or Leah grow up believing the lies that destroyed us." You've likely heard James Delaney's name tossed around over the years. Your mother hated him, said he was manipulative, that he pushed me into bad investments, illegal schemes. Truth is, he was more than that. He was your uncle. Rachel blinked. Not by blood, but by blood oath. We served together, long before you were born. He saved my life once. I owed him everything. And that debt cost me more than I ever imagined. In 1996, I signed over the deed to this house to him. Temporarily, or so I thought. He said it was for collateral, business stuff. I didn't question it. I trusted him. But when I tried to reclaim it years later, he had already transferred it into a shell company. On paper, the house hasn't been in my name since you were 10. Rachel stood up, her heart pounding. She kicked aside some debris near the trunk and found another box, this one filled with old VHS tapes labeled in Sharpie, Delaney Meetings. Her hands shook as she picked one up. The letter continued. I confronted him, threatened to go public. He warned me if I did, he'd drag the family name through the mud. And Rachel, I believed him. I was weak. I stayed silent. I let him control the house, the land, and my name. But it didn't stop there. Your mother, she found something that could expose him. And the night I planned to meet her, I never made it. Rachel's breath hitched. If the autopsy says heart attack, know this. I hadn't had a single medical issue in years. But I drank what he handed me. Trusted the wrong man. One last time. Rachel dropped the letter. She staggered out of the shed, gulping in the cold morning air. None of this made sense. If James Delaney had stolen the house on paper and her father had known, why had her mother stayed silent after his death? Why hadn't she told Rachel or Leah? And more terrifyingly, if James was still around, was he the buyer? She raced back into the house and pulled out her laptop from her overnight bag. The Wi-Fi was spotty, but she got a connection. She searched the property records for 412 Sycamore Ridge. Her jaw clenched. Current owner, SD Holdings LLC. She clicked through. Managing agent, James D. Her stomach turned. It was him. And the buyer wasn't just anonymous anymore. He was coming back to finish the job. By early afternoon, the sky had turned gray. Rain gathered on the edges of the windows like heavy tears. Rachel sat at the kitchen table, letter still open in front of her, the house creaking with the wind's sighs. A knock startled her. It wasn't the front door. It came from the side, the old porch entrance near the garage. She stood up slowly, her mind still swirling from what she'd read. The knock came again, firmer this time. She grabbed her phone, quietly turned on the voice recorder, and slipped it into her hoodie pocket. She didn't have a plan, but instinct told her to document everything now. When she opened the door, a tall man in a dark trench coat stood there, his salt and pepper hair slicked back, eyes sharp as flint. "Rachel," he said smoothly. "I was hoping to see you before the sale went through." She didn't answer, just stared. He glanced past her into the house. "You've done well keeping it intact. Looks just like it did when your father was alive." Her blood ran cold. "James?" He smiled. "Still sharp, I see." She stepped out and closed the door behind her. "Why are you really here?" He looked amused. "To collect what's mine, of course. The house, the land, and whatever your father thought he could hide from me." Rachel narrowed her eyes. "You mean the tapes, or the will?" His expression froze, so she was right. He took a step closer, voice low. "Be careful, Rachel. Some truths aren't worth digging up." But Rachel wasn't 12 anymore, and she wasn't scared of shadows. She tilted her chin. "Neither are threats." They stood there for a moment, the wind howling behind them. Then he turned and walked off, leaving only the sound of his footsteps in the wet gravel. Inside, Rachel locked every door, drew every curtain. And then she called someone she hadn't spoken to in years, her sister. The phone rang, until finally, click. "Leah," she whispered. "He's back. We need to talk. Now." Silence. Then Leah's voice came through, tired, hesitant, but there. "You found the shed, didn't you?" Rachel froze. "You knew?" The House on Sycamore Ridge. Part 3. The Sisters' Silence. Rachel's hand clenched around the phone. knuckles whitening as her sister's voice echoed back through the receiver. "You found the shed, didn't you?" The question wasn't one of surprise. It was resignation, as though Leah had been waiting for this moment, as though the truth had been hanging in the air between them for years, silent and unspoken, like smoke curling in an untouched room. Rachel's voice trembled. "You knew? About the trunk? About him?" There was a long pause. On the other end of the line, Rachel heard a door click shut, a muffled sigh. Leah finally spoke, softer now. "I didn't know everything, not until after Mom died." "What does that even mean?" Rachel whispered, pacing across the kitchen tiles. "You let me come back here thinking this was just a property sale. You didn't say a word about Delaney." "I didn't want to drag you back into it," Leah said. "You were finally living your own life, away from all this." Rachel stopped walking. "So you left me in the dark while you kept secrets about our father's death? While someone like James Delaney tried to erase everything we ever had?" Leah didn't respond right away. And then, in a brittle voice, "I was protecting myself." Rachel's heart sank. "What?" "I was 19, Rachel," Leah said, almost in a whisper. "Dad was gone. Mom barely held it together. And then one night, she woke me up and shoved a folder into my arms and told me if anything ever happened to her, I needed to burn it, not read it, burn it." Rachel pressed the phone tighter to her ear. "What was in the folder?" "I never found out," Leah said, "because 2 days later the house was broken into. Nothing stolen, no mess, just the folder was gone." Rachel felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. "You didn't tell the police?" Leah scoffed. "You think they would have believed me, that some ghost from Dad's past came back to cover his tracks?" A deep silence settled between them. Then Leah said quietly, "I thought if I just gave up the house, didn't fight, maybe Delaney would leave us alone." Rachel's pulse quickened. "Wait, you gave him the house?" "I signed the transfer papers Mom left behind," Leah admitted. "He already controlled the deed through that shell company. It was just a formality. I thought it would make him go away." "Leah," Rachel's voice cracked, "he's not going away. He offered to buy the house. Cash, no inspection. That's not a man who's done with us. That's someone cleaning up." There was a ragged exhale from the other end. "Where are you right now?" Rachel asked. "I'm in Larkhill," Leah said, "still renting that apartment above the flower shop." "Good. Don't go anywhere," Rachel said. "I'm coming to you." Rachel didn't sleep that night. She stayed up reviewing every document from the trunk, snapping photos of pages she couldn't make sense of. Some were faded, others written in code, with strings of letters and numbers that felt like passwords or coordinates. One document stood out, a hand-drawn map of the Sycamore property. But something was different. It wasn't just the house and shed. It marked an X far behind the tree line, in the woods near the slope where their father used to take them sledding. Rachel stared at it, then copied the coordinates into her phone. By mid-morning, she had loaded everything into her car and driven the 45 minutes to Larkhill. Leah looked thinner than Rachel remembered, her hair pulled back in a loose bun, shadows under her eyes that hinted at years of sleepless nights and unspoken guilt. They hugged awkwardly, then sat on the worn-out couch in Leah's tiny living room. "I should have told you everything," Leah said. "I should have asked sooner," Rachel replied. Together, they laid the evidence across the coffee table. The tapes, the will, the birth certificate, the handwritten letters. Rachel pointed at the map. "He marked something in the woods. Do you remember Dad ever hiding anything out there?" Leah shook her head. "Not unless you count the time he buried our hamster in a shoebox under the old birch tree." Rachel smiled weakly. "I doubt that's what this is." Then Leah pointed to a specific letter sealed in an envelope addressed to M.D. "Who's that?" she asked. Rachel frowned. "I don't know. But if Dad wrote to them, maybe they were his backup." Leah held the envelope up to the light. Inside was a single business card. It read, "Mira Donnelly, investigative journalist. Truth doesn't expire." a phone number scribbled in pen. Rachel immediately dialed it. It rang, once, twice. Then a voice answered, raspy, cautious. "This is Mira." Rachel took a deep breath. "My name is Rachel Linwood. You don't know me, but I think you knew my father. William Linwood." Silence, then the voice said quietly, "Rachel, I've been waiting 20 years for this call." The House on Sycamore Ridge. Part 4. The Woman Who Waited. Rachel pressed the phone tighter against her ear. "You knew he was dead, right?" "I read the obituary," Mira Donnelly said slowly. Her voice had the gravel of someone who had seen too much, smoked too long, and stopped trusting too easily. "But I also knew Bill Linwood didn't die of a heart attack, and I knew he'd never go quiet without leaving someone a breadcrumb trail. Looks like that someone was you." Rachel's chest tightened. Why would he trust a stranger more than his own family? Mira's answer came quick. "Because I wasn't in the family. That meant I could stay alive." Silence hung thick between them. Leah leaned forward, listening intently. "Where are you?" Mira asked. Rachel hesitated. "Lark Hill, at my sister's place." "Stay there tonight. I'll be there by morning." "Wait," Rachel said. "You're coming here?" "I've kept quiet for 2 decades, Rachel. But if James Delaney's moving again and you found the will, it means the window to stop him is about to slam shut." Before Rachel could respond, Mira hung up. The next morning, Mira Donnelly arrived just after 9 a.m. in a rusted blue SUV with Virginia plates and duct tape on the rear passenger window. She wore an oversized trench coat, scuffed boots, and carried a leather satchel that looked like it hadn't been zipped shut since the Bush administration. She gave Rachel a single, firm nod. "You look like your dad. Same eyes, same stubborn jaw." Rachel didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Mira stepped inside, gave Leah a once-over, then started unpacking folders onto the kitchen table like she'd never stopped being a reporter. "I was working on an exposé in the late 90s, she said, "back when your dad reached out. He didn't say much at first, just that he'd been coerced into signing over property to a former associate who was laundering money through real estate. Your house was one of several." Rachel's stomach flipped. "So it wasn't just our home?" Mira shook her head. "It was the first, the test run." She slid a document across the table. Delaney was running a shell corporation racket, buying properties from desperate veterans who trusted him, then flipping or renting them under fake names, funneling the profits offshore. Leah looked sick. "And no one stopped him?" "Oh, I tried," Mira said. "I had 2 interviews lined up, one with your dad, the other with a man named Greg Sorensen, former Army, same unit as your father and Delaney." Rachel's breath caught. "What happened?" Mira's face darkened. "Sorensen died in a fire 3 days before our meeting. Electrical, they said. Faulty wiring, except he'd just redone his whole system 6 weeks before." "And my father?" Rachel whispered. "He called me the night he died. Left a voicemail. Said he had everything I needed, and that he wasn't afraid anymore. He was going to blow the lid off everything. He told me..." Mira's voice cracked slightly, the only break in her armor. "He told me to watch out for his daughters, that he might not make it." Rachel stood from the table, trying to make sense of the storm gathering in her mind. "There's something else," she said. "In the shed. A map. Marked with an X in the woods behind our house." Mira's eyes lit up. "Did you go there?" "Not yet," Rachel said. "I wanted to talk to you first." "Then we go now," Mira said, grabbing her coat. Whatever he buried there, he wanted it found. They drove back to Sycamore Ridge under a cloud-covered sky, Mira riding shotgun, flipping through old photos like they were tactical maps. She pointed at one in particular, Bill Linwood in military fatigues, standing beside a younger Delaney and a third man whose face had been scribbled out in red ink. "That's Sorensen," she said. "They called themselves the Ridge 3. You ever hear that name?" Rachel shook her head. They parked near the woods and followed the trail past the tree line. Wind rustled the branches overhead as Rachel checked her GPS. They reached the spot marked on the map, a small clearing surrounded by birch trees. Mira scanned the area and walked to a patch of earth that looked slightly disturbed. "Here," she said. Rachel knelt down, fingers digging into the cold soil. Beneath the first few inches, her hand struck something hard. They unearthed a small metal safe. Mira pulled out a lock-picking set from her satchel like it was nothing. This might take a minute. 5 minutes later, with a satisfying click, the safe opened. Inside, 3 microcassettes, a yellowed photo of a group of men in uniform, Bill, Delaney, Sorensen, and a fourth man labeled only as R. Weller, and a thick, folded document labeled Operation Hawk Ridge, declassified eyes only. Mira stared at it, stunned. This wasn't just a real estate scam. This was military. Rachel felt the weight of the air shift. "What do you mean?" "I mean your father and Delaney were involved in something bigger, something classified, and whatever Delaney's doing now, he's not just covering up theft." Mira looked up at Rachel, eyes wide with urgency. "He's covering up treason." The House on Sycamore Ridge, Part 5, Treason in the Trees. The wind through the birch trees moaned like a distant siren. Rachel stared at the word treason as if it might rearrange itself into something less terrifying. But Mira's face was solemn, set like stone, her fingers frozen around the weathered file marked Operation Hawk Ridge. "I thought this was about the house," Rachel murmured, her voice shaking. "About Dad being swindled, not this." Mira didn't look up. "It started with the house. That was just the crack in the door." Rachel took a slow step backward, her boots crunching over frost-bitten leaves. Leah stood silent behind them, pale as the birch bark surrounding them. "What the hell was Operation Hawk Ridge?" Leah finally asked. Mira opened the file gently, like she was unfolding a bomb blueprint. Inside were scanned reports, some so faded the ink had nearly bled into nothing. Others were clearer, typed mission logs, coordinates, redacted names, photos of armed men in foreign deserts, and one signature stamped again and again. James D. Delaney, Tactical Intel Liaison, U.S. Army retired. Rachel read aloud from a page near the top. Subject: Operation Hawk Ridge, Intelligence Asset Diversion Protocol. Objective: secure and relocate recovered assets from Joint Covert Ops, 1990 to 1992. Assets to be shielded from international review. Intelligence property to be reassigned under private channels to avoid federal trace. Mira rubbed her forehead. This wasn't just illegal, it was traitorous. Your father was caught in the middle. My guess is he thought it was just another mission until the war ended. But when they started moving military assets into private hands, he got scared. He tried to back out. Rachel looked at the tapes they'd found inside the safe, each labeled by year. "What's on these?" she asked. "I don't know yet," Mira said, "but I brought a player." They returned to the house in near silence. Leah clutched the envelope of photos like it was the only anchor keeping her grounded. Back inside, Mira placed a dusty microcassette recorder on the coffee table and slotted the first tape. Tape 1, 1991. The machine clicked and hissed. A grainy voice, unmistakably their father's, filled the room. "This is Bill Linwood. If this tape gets out, it means I'm dead. Delaney's laundering weapons, not just money. He says they're for private security contracts. But it's a lie. I've seen the logs. They're being shipped to places we're not supposed to be. Places Congress never signed off on." The audio popped, then continued. "I told Sorensen we needed to go public. He agreed. Said he had Mira Donnelly's number. Said she'd help. That night, someone cut his brakes." Rachel sat forward, barely breathing. "Leah, Rachel, if you're hearing this, I want you to know I tried. I didn't run. I didn't die a coward. And whatever he says, don't let James Delaney get his hands on this house. It's not just ours. It's leverage. It's evidence." The tape stopped with a click. Leah covered her mouth, tears streaming silently. Rachel's fingers dug into her jeans, fury simmering beneath her skin. Mira looked between them. "Now you understand why he's buying the house. It's not for nostalgia. It's because whatever your father hid, Whatever connects this land to the operation is still here. That night, Rachel didn't sleep. Neither did Mira. They stayed up reviewing the other tapes, piecing together names, dates, shipments, and the chain of events that unraveled their father's last years. The second tape detailed a meeting Delaney had with a private arms dealer in Zurich. The third ended abruptly, cutting off after Rachel's father whispered, "I think Leah suspects something, but she's too young. I don't want her carrying this." Rachel's throat tightened. He had tried to protect them. At dawn, Rachel drove alone back to Sycamore Ridge. She needed to see the house through new eyes, not as the place she'd grown up, but as a vault, a battlefield, a trap. As she pulled up, a black Range Rover was already parked in the driveway. Her heart stopped. James Delaney stood on the porch. He wore a charcoal suit, no coat, no gloves, just confidence, and a smirk like he already owned the sunrise. "I figured you'd come back alone," he said, voice cool. "Your sister was always the quieter one, but you—" "Cut the crap!" Rachel snapped. "I know what you did. We found the tapes, the safe, the map. I know about Operation Hawk Ridge." For the first time, Delaney's expression flickered. Barely, but enough. He stepped forward. "You think anyone's going to believe you? Two girls and a washed-up journalist digging through conspiracy theories and old war stories?" "Maybe not," Rachel said. "But if you really weren't afraid, you wouldn't be here." Delaney stopped at the edge of the porch, his gaze narrowing. "You want to play hero, Rachel? Fine, but be careful." He pulled a small envelope from his coat and tossed it onto the steps. Rachel didn't move. "That's your father's file, the one I didn't destroy. It has names, dates, real ones. You release it, and you don't just expose me. You bury men who are still very much alive. Powerful men. Men who don't forgive." He turned back toward his car. "Oh," he said over his shoulder. "And Rachel." She stared, jaw clenched. "Sometimes dead men leave landmines instead of legacies." Rachel watched him drive away, the envelope still resting where it landed. She didn't pick it up. Not yet. Because deep in her chest, something had shifted. This wasn't just about her father anymore. It was about everyone he tried to protect, and everyone still walking free because of what they'd buried on this land. And Rachel Linwood? She was done letting ghosts do the fighting for her. The house on Sycamore Ridge. Final chapter. The Reckoning. By the time Rachel returned to Larkhill that evening, the wind had picked up and a storm was building. The envelope Delaney left lay on the passenger seat beside her, still unopened. She'd stared at it for hours, touched the corner once, then pulled her hand away. Every part of her wanted to rip it open, to see what secrets Delaney was threatening her with. But she knew, whatever was inside, it was leverage, and leverage only worked if you let it. Inside Leah's apartment, Mira had set up what looked like a war room. Papers covered every flat surface. A whiteboard had names, arrows, and timelines drawn in red and blue marker. And in the middle of it all, Mira stood like a general surveying a battlefield. "He came to the house," Rachel said, closing the door behind her. "He knows we're close." Mira's eyes narrowed. "Then we move now." 48 hours later, they had a plan. Rachel and Mira drove to a local news station in Syracuse with copies of the tapes and declassified documents. Mira's name still carried weight. Her former editor, now a news director, gave them an emergency sit-down in a back room. He called in legal, then the head of investigative. Within 6 hours, a small team of journalists was vetting the documents, and by nightfall, the story was in motion. But Rachel didn't wait to watch it unfold. She went back to Sycamore Ridge one last time. She arrived at dusk, alone. The house was silent, dark, the trees rustling like whispers overhead. Delaney was already there. He stepped out of the shadows, hands tucked in his coat pockets. His smile was gone. "I warned you." Rachel didn't flinch, and I listened. "That's why I'm here." Delaney tilted his head. "To beg?" "No," she said. "To end this." She held out the envelope, unopened. "I don't need it. I didn't come to play your game. I came to show you how it ends." Delaney's eyes flickered with something sharp and dangerous. You're bluffing. No, Rachel said. I'm broadcasting. She turned slightly, revealing the tiny mic clipped to her coat. I'm live, James. He froze. A soft red glow blinked from the small camera on her shoulder, streaming everything to Mira, who waited back at the station with the editors. Every word he spoke, every step he took, every breath. Delaney's face twitched. Then he laughed. Smart girl, he muttered. Rachel didn't smile. You gambled on everyone staying silent. You underestimated the daughter of the man you killed. His eyes darkened. He was weak. No, she said, stepping closer. He was strong enough to keep your secret buried for decades. I'm the one digging it up. Delaney lunged toward her, but before he reached her, headlights flooded the yard. 2 unmarked black SUVs rolled up the drive. Federal agents spilled out, Mira among them, holding up her press badge and shouting, James Delaney, step away from her. You're under investigation for conspiracy, money laundering, and obstruction of justice under federal jurisdiction. He froze mid-step. Rachel looked him in the eyes, heart pounding. This house isn't yours anymore, she whispered, and neither is our silence. 3 weeks later, the house sat quiet for the first time in years, empty, cleansed. Delaney had been taken into custody. Investigations opened, more names surfaced. Old ghosts had faces now. Men in suits and uniforms called before committees, forced to account for what they buried under classified seals. Mira's expose ran nationally. Hawk Ridge, the operation that betrayed its own. Her voice narrated it, but Rachel's name was everywhere. And the house? It didn't go on the market. Rachel kept it. She gutted the shed, removed the wallpaper with the peeling corner, hung her father's old photograph on the mantel. Leah visited every weekend now. Sometimes they sat on the back porch and didn't talk at all, just listened to the breeze through the sycamores, as if the trees were whispering, "Thank you." On one such evening, Leah turned to her. You ever think about selling? Rachel looked around. No, she said. This house protected our father. It protected the truth. Leah nodded. And now? Now, Rachel said, leaning back in her chair. It protects us. A long silence stretched between them. Then, from inside, the old tape recorder clicked. Rachel rose slowly and walked to it. It had rewound. She pressed play. Her father's voice filled the house one last time. If you're hearing this, then you found the truth. You were always meant to. I couldn't finish the fight, but I knew you would. Rachel closed her eyes, tears spilling down her cheeks. I did, Dad, she whispered. I did. The end.